Okay, good morning. Welcome to an introduction to Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. Since it's a small group here, you could certainly post in the chat. I may not necessarily see it right away, or you can also unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment or would like to answer a question. Oh, I see a few more people are joining, so I'll wait another minute or two. But yes, you can certainly post a question or comment in the chat, or like I said, unmute yourself just because it's a smaller group and you have the you're muted upon entrance, but you do have the capability, excuse me, of unmuting yourself. I'm sorry, my voice is a bit wonky today. And of course I had to press that all day. So I'm going to be talking about an introduction to UDL. You could just comment in the chat. Are you familiar with UDL? This is going to be an introduction, like a beginner level. Has anyone had any training on UDL at all? Okay, no training. Thank you, Brittany. Okay. Thank you, Jenny. So again, this is just going to be, an introductory, just a general overview of UDL. So if you've had no training or aren't familiar with it at all, it will at least give you a starting point. And I'm okay. Sorry, my voice is not good today. I'm presenting all day. This is my information. My name is confusing. Legally, I'm still Valerie Lill, but I did get married during the pandemic, so my name will be changing. It just, Social Security cannot do that yet. I am the Assistive Technology, that's what AT stands for, and AT Tech, the Assistive Technology Trainer and Consultant. And there is my contact information if you need to touch base with me anytime after this training, my phone number, and you can certainly follow me on Twitter. Excuse me. Okay, and if you watch the introductory video that Tanya did, she went over this information with the Zoom webinar meeting norms about engagement and what that would look like, honoring perspectives, assuming good intentions. So I'm not going to spend time going over this, as you heard that already this morning, assuming you watched the introductory message. You can get Act 48 credits, which Tanya also talked about this morning. Excuse me. They're due July 31st. Again, if you're one of the first 100, you can get the books for that day, as Tanya discussed. Okay, I am going to get into the objectives for the session today. I'm going to talk about the differences between Universal Design for Learning, UDL, and Differentiated Instruction. And the reason I'm going to bring that up is because I've found in my work that a lot of educators tend to think they're the same thing. Well, I do differentiate instruction. I do UDL, but they're actually not the same. So I'm going to kind of delineate what those differences are. It'll make more sense that way. I'm also going to talk about going over what the 3 UDL principles are. So again, that basic information and how they relate to how your brain and all your students' brains learn. And there is going to be an interactive thing you're going to have to do for me. So you'll see, you won't have to talk. And just to also at the end, talking about some potential barriers, either in your classroom and how those could potentially influence your students. And obviously we, right now with the mix of, whatever type of learning you're doing, there's going to be additional barriers. If you're in a face-to-face classroom, of course, there's certain barriers, but obviously in remote learning, that presents a whole new set of barriers. And then I'm going to give you some resources at the end to begin to develop strategies to adhering to the UDL principles, the guidelines when designing and planning instructions. And again, I'm going to share some links at the end that are going to allow you to do that. And depending on what our time is, you may have some time to explore some of those and answer questions and ask some questions about that. I'll leave some time to do that. I won't just be talking for the whole hour. Hopefully that's not my intent. Okay, the very first thing I need you to do, and I need all our attendees to do this, you don't actually say anything, there is a UDL survey that I'm going to need you to complete. And hopefully you can click on that hyperlink to do it. It is very short. It's a couple of questions. And maybe if you can just indicate in the chat box when you're done with it, because I am going to bring the results of the survey up later. I'm hoping I don't have any issues doing that. We'll find out, because I've never done a survey with a Google survey within Zoom before, but I didn't want to do it as a poll. It was a little bit different. Oops, sorry about that. I did not mean to click this to the next slide. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I just realized I didn't put the, hold on. Let me pause sharing for a minute. Or stop sharing for a minute. Sorry about that. I didn't put the link in the chat. It's Monday. Let me do that for you. Hang on. So if you just have patience. Yeah, the link. Sorry about that. I'll put it here. If you can't access it, please let me know. Yeah, you have to go. You could go, if you have the Google Slides presentation that was hyperlinked in the chart, you would be able to just click on that. But if you didn't have that open, you wouldn't have been able to. And I'm hoping that I can, I'm a little worried about being able to get to the results in a little bit later, but I'm hoping that my plan worked, because I do. Oh, that's not the folder I want. Yeah, I should be able to see your responses. I see at least one person completed it. Thank you. Yeah, so if everybody can complete that Google link, that's a survey about UDL, I would appreciate that. Okay. Okay. And you could, okay, thank you. I see several of you have completed it already. Let me just go back to the presentation. And okay, thank you. Let's share my screen. And present. Okay, can everybody, oops, sorry about that. Okay, thank you. Can everybody see the screen now? We good? Okay. I'm having many technical difficulties here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, the results of that survey, they'll make sense a little bit later. If you really, I mean, some of the questions, if you know a little bit about UDL, you might know why I asked those questions. So first I'm going to get into exactly what is UDL and common things that I hear from teachers and just people in education when they hear Universal Design for Learning. One is UDL is a curriculum. I don't know if you've heard that before. No, that is not accurate at all. I'm going to have some different quotes and the sources there if you're interested. It is not a curriculum. It's an approach to curriculum. It's something that happens that you're going to do as an instructor regardless of what the curriculum is. Again, to access all learners. And I'm not going to sit here and read quotes to you. You have access to the presentation, but just to clarify what it is not, and then I'm going to talk about what it is. I hear this a lot too. UDL is special education. I will tell you my background. I was a school-based speech pathologist for almost 20 years before I got into assistive technology, training consulting. So a lot of regular education teachers think, oh, this is a special ed thing. It can benefit special ed students, but it is not a special ed. It is not special education. So no, that is not what UDL is. It's a way of thinking about teaching and learning. And again, here's the key here. It helps all students succeed, not just your special education students. Here's an example of a comic that's often used to explain what UDL is when people are not quite sure what it is. So again, I'm not going to read to you because you're all capable of doing that. But again, they want he's cleaning the steps and then he's waiting and the student in the wheelchair is asking him to shovel the ramp. But he's like, well, I got to do the steps first. But again, the ramp, if he would shovel the ramp, all students could enter the building. So why not just shovel the ramp so everyone can get in the building faster? Again, so a lot of the strategies for UDL maybe were thought of or designed with special education students in mind. However, they can benefit all students, not just your students with special needs. Again, just like shoveling the ramp benefits all those kids, not just the kid in the wheelchair, to get into the school. And I'd like to think they'd shovel before the kids showed up for school, but you know, it's summer, so. Again, I talked about this in my introduction. UDL is differentiated instruction. Out of all the different, what people think it is, this is the one I probably hear the most. Well, I do differentiated instruction, which is great, but it's not the same thing. And we're gonna spend some time delineating those differences. So I'm gonna use a real life example to kind of, hopefully you can relate to or understand to say, oh, that's what UDL is versus differentiated instruction. And it's early enough, so it's not like I have to worry about lunchtime and people being hungry when I give this example, because it is food related. So you're gonna have a goal, just like you have an instructional goal. This is our UDL goal. Okay, you're gonna throw a dinner party for 5 guests. You make a really mean lasagna, and that's what you want your guests to eat. Apologize for my voice today. So you're gonna serve lasagna to all guests. That's gonna be differentiated instruction in our example. Okay, so everybody, all 5 people that are coming to your house are getting your lasagna. And then we think about differentiated instruction. Okay, you give all students the same assessment. Now you know what levels they're at. Now you're going to differentiate. So, oh, I'm sorry. I did not mean to. I clicked the thing before I was ready. I'm going to have to stop sharing for a minute. Sorry about that. I am a little, let me go back a slide. A little rusty on my zooming. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't want to present. Sorry, I'm sorry, you're my first ones in the morning. So, okay, you're gonna serve lasagna to all your guests. That's differentiated instruction. You have 5 people coming in. 3 of those people have no food issues. They're gonna eat your lasagna and it's fabulous. What about you have a friend, I have a sister who has celiac disease. She can't eat the lasagna because she can't have the noodles. I have family members who are vegetarians. They can't eat the lasagna because it has meat in it. I also have a family member who is lactose intolerant. They can't have lasagna, it has cheese in it. Now what do? You got the lasagna served, and so now you have to try to, like, different ways, different strategies, you know, to fix the food so that all your guests can eat it. Okay, 3 of them are good. They don't need any additional accommodations. They're eating lasagna as is. The vegetarian, okay, maybe you could try scraping the meat off. I know some vegetarians who are fine with that. They will eat it, something if meat has touched it, but not eat the meat. I know other vegetarians who wouldn't eat it because meat touched it, they wouldn't eat it. So what are you gonna do for them? The person with celiac or who has a gluten allergy definitely couldn't eat the lasagna because of the noodles. And then you have the person who's lactose intolerant. Again, you could try scraping off that cheese, but lasagna is quite cheesy. So probably that's not going to be the best choice. So how are you going to serve all your guests? They're all at different level. They all have different needs, and you can't just meet their needs with that one lasagna. What could we have done before this party to maybe plan a little bit better and meet all of our guests' needs? So we're going to think of a universal design for learning approach, and that would be a buffet table. So before, instead of planning, you have people coming over for a dinner party, maybe you don't know all their dietary needs. They might not, want to share that information publicly. So what could you do to meet their needs before even walking the door when you don't know what someone's dietary needs are? You could have a buffet table. So you have your people who can eat anything. So you can have pastas out. You can have, zoodles I have in the middle. I love zoodles. For people who like those, you could have meatballs. You could have cheese. You could have garlic bread, a whole bunch of different Italian options for them to choose from. And that's what universal design for learning is about: choices, having options. So your vegetarian doesn't have to eat the meatballs, doesn't have to eat something that has sausage or chicken or anything in it. They can eat the dishes that don't have meat in it. Your person who has celiac and gluten intolerance, they could eat zoodles as long as there's nothing touching the zoodles. For example, they could eat some, other vegetables, a salad, some other options that you have available. You have your person who has the lactose intolerance. They can't have the cheese. Just don't eat anything that you're offering with cheese in. It looks like the pasta dish, for example, on the right, and the zoodles in the middle, they do not have cheese. So again, universal design for learning is about planning in advance. Before you even have the dinner party, before you have instruction, you're giving them options that are going to meet all their needs. So think of it as a buffet. So this is just sort of an analogy to kind of help you relate to differentiated instruction versus learning, UDL, but I'm going to explain it I have a little chart to show it. So here's a little chart I made up to show UDL on the left, differentiated instruction on the right. And I'm not saying differentiated instruction is bad. I'm just trying to explain how they're different from each other. So UDL, again, you're proactive in removing the barriers. You're having a buffet before you even know your guests' dietary needs. Differentiated instruction, reactive in removing the barriers. So thinking with differentiated, excuse me, differentiated instruction, again, you have that lasagna, you gave the screener, now you have to figure out which groups and how you can make the instruction all the students learn. What do they need afterwards? UDL is it requires advanced planning. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. It's not just like, oh, here we go, we're gonna do this. You have to do it beforehand, and it's gonna be based on, again, students' needs, of course, but also preferences. And that's why I gave you that survey, because we're going to come back to that, because that was all about your student preferences. Differentiated instruction responds to those during instruction and after instruction, whereas UDL, you're doing before the kid even walks in the door. UDL is centered on the learner. The learner kind of makes the choices and gets options, whereas differentiated instruction, it's teacher-centered in that the teacher is the one who's deciding what groups they belong to, excuse me, what groups they belong to, or what instruction they need to meet the expectations. And lastly, UDL is looking at fixing the curriculum, the environment, the learning experience. You're making accommodations for those things before the learners walk in the door. Where differentiated instruction, you're looking at getting that learner back to where, on grade level, in the 80% where all the other where the 80% of the students can get it without extra help. You're trying to get that learner back there. And again, UDL is all before any of that happens. So you can use UDL and differentiated instruction first, but UDL happens before you even teach a lesson, whereas differentiation is afterwards, if that makes sense. Okay. I'm going to show you some definitions of what UDL is, and I do have the sources there, cast.org. There, you're going to be your go-to site. I do have them hyperlinked here, and I can certainly put that in the chat. Is a great resource for universal design for learning. So this is their definition for what it's a framework. It's improving your teaching and learning for all people. Again, it's not just your special ed kids or your ELL kids, you know, it's for all of your learners. And again, the big thing is it's based on science, research, and how the brain learns, how all humans learn, not just kids, but the UDL also applies for adults. So UDL, excuse me, is about options. So looking at the school on the left, looking at the school on the right. The school on the left, there's different kids working in small groups. And again, this is, you know, when we're in face-to-face school and can work in small groups. But again, the principles can apply to virtual learning also. Old school, you know, the picture on the right looks like my mom's pictures from when she was in school in the 50s. You know, they're all the kids are in straight rows. Their desks all look, their learning situation, their desks all look the same. They're all sitting there. And again, that was before we had kids with disabilities typically in the regular education classroom. So our rooms look obviously dramatically different than what they looked like in the old days. We give kids options. Excuse me. I do have a video to show you. I know, a video within a Zoom. It's short, but it's a great video from CAST about UDL. And it's a great introduction to the concepts. So if you're having any issue hearing the video, please tell me, because I have not tried to play a video in a Zoom before. So if you can't hear it, please say something in the chat or unmute yourself. Oh, okay, well that didn't work. Let me try that again. I'm sorry about that. I might not be able to play it. Can you hear that? Yes, no?
This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal, and she's got a very diverse group of students. And so does this teacher. And this one. Most do. In fact, research shows that the way people learn is as unique as their fingerprints. What does this mean for teachers of today? Classrooms are highly diverse, and curriculum needs to be designed from the start to meet this diversity. Universal design for learning is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. Whoa, that's a fancy term. Universal design for learning. Let's unpack it a bit. Let's think about the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in a classroom brings her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think about the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have three broad networks. One for recognition, the what of learning, one for skills and strategies, the how of learning, and one for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all three. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and to accommodate all kinds of users, with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building works better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, what barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students reaching these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use the 3 UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so that students can acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interests and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they will persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. Get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum and keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways. Allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they know in different ways. And offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all. For more information on UDL, go to www.cast.org.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the slides. So, just give me a second there. Oh, sorry about that. I'm having some technical difficulties here. Okay. There we go. Okay, so a lot of this was gone over in the video, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. Okay, so UDL, the educator is the one who's providing flexibility. So there were 3 principles of UDL, and they talked about, and it activates, the research shows 3 different areas of the brain are activated. Now we know the more of your brain that you activate, that a student's brain is activated when they're supposed to learn, the more they can learn that information. So that's why we want to try to activate all these areas of the brains, all these areas of the brain, and how we use it through UDL. Excuse me. So the principle 1 is the multiple means of representation. So that's how you present the information. And I can give some examples. For example, whether, in class, are you showing a film? Well, even in this presentation, I'm talking, but I also showed a video. I had you do a Google survey. There were different ways of interacting with the content. It wasn't just a teacher lecturing, for example, at the front of a classroom. Or in a virtual environment, that would look differently. That obviously you might be a little bit more limited on that. Principle 2 is action and expression. It's how do the students show that they learned the information, that they have the knowledge, that they understood the content. And then principle 3 is your means of engagement. It's in the way the students are engaged. How are you getting their buy-in to want to learn that? Now, I personally think principle 3, the means of engagement, should be principle 1, because if they're not engaged, they're not going to learn anything. But this is just how CAST has it set up. That's just my personal opinion. So again, the what of learning. So what are the students are learning? That's the multiple means of representation. How are they going to learn that content? And I can give an example, like for my own kid from when he had remote learning. It's like, I cannot, learn algebra just by watching YouTube videos. That was really a struggle for him. So again, the what of learning, it was only presented as a YouTube video. That was his only option for learning it. What are some other options maybe that would have made him be able to learn that content other than YouTube videos? What are some other choices that could have been built in there? Then the next one is the how of learning, the action and expression. Again, that activates a different part of the brain. So it's how can they express what they know? So for example, I always use my son's real life examples for these just because of examples of UDL not used. He does not go to a school within Lincoln Intermediate Unit. It's 25 districts. So when he was in 4th grade and they had to do a book report, they had to he has a lot of fine motor difficulties, and they had to draw pictures demonstrating things in the story. Well, that was pure torture for him because he cannot draw and has difficulty with fine motor skills, but he was not given a choice. I even asked, well, can he do this? Can he do this? This instead. No, there were no choices given. His action expression had to be drawing pictures, which did not play to his personal interests or strengths. So for him, it was a struggle. So again, thinking of giving the students choices and how they could have shown that they read the book and understood it. And the why of learning, that can actually be the most important. To get those kids motivated and interested in learning, they need to know why. Why is this important? You know, how is this related to me? And I'm going to talk about this more. If you're attending tomorrow, I'm doing a presentation regarding UDL related to behavior. I'm going to spend the session talking a lot about the whys of learning and how to get students engaged, or why it's important to get them engaged and motivated to learn, and how that can help with behaviors. So if you have more interest in that topic, I am going to discuss that tomorrow. Okay, I'm hoping this UDL survey link results works. If not, I will go the other way to do it. Okay, oh, it did. Okay, so I'm going to actually show it in a different way, but I had, and they're anonymous, so you can't see who said what. I'm going to make this a little bit easier to read. Actually, I'm going to actually try to do this a different, hold on. I'm actually going to stop sharing for a minute. I'm going to do this a different way. And I'm going to see if I can do it in a pie chart. Again, UDL thinking, for me personally, to try to read it as text is probably a little bit harder, but to read it as a pie chart, that would be a little bit easier. And that's what I'm going to share my screen again so you can see it as a pie chart. Because for me, that's a little bit easier to read. Now, maybe for you, you'd rather read the text. Maybe the colors are too overwhelming, again. So, but this is just to show you guys are all educators, you're adults, you all have your learning preferences. Do I see just one color in any of these? Absolutely not. I see at least 3 colors. That shows me you all learn different ways and you have different preferences in how you learn. So I did about the book club. So to get you excited, so we're thinking about how are you going to get those engaged, that why of learning, that buy-in. What's going to get you engaged? The book leader talked about, some said, I mean, this was fairly evenly divided. Somebody wants to hear a short selection. Some of you want to watch a video and see a clip about it. Somebody reads the New York Times reviews, and there's nothing wrong with those. I know for me, you know, I used to get Entertainment Weekly, and sometimes they'd put the first chapter of a book or part of a book, like Stephen King books, which I love, at in the Entertainment Weekly. I know I'm dating myself. I read magazines. This was like 10 years ago. That would make me want to read the book every time because they hooked me. So I might have picked reading a short selection aloud as my buy-in. But again, there's no wrong answers. It's just, thinking about your learners. Not the same method is going to get all your learners engaged. How you prefer to read the book. Again, thinking of those multiple means of representation. The majority prefer hardcover. Okay, majority of you are old school. It took me a long time, but I got buy-in for me personally on the Kindle. I do like reading books on the Kindle, and that seems to be the smallest percentage. And then we have some of you prefer audiobooks, and you know, I have a fairly long commute to LIU. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I will do that while I'm doing housework, while I'm cooking. So I agree, I like all 3 of those, but you're gonna have a preference. So if I was running the book club and I handed everyone a hardcover, okay, half of you would be happy, but the other half of you would have a different preference. So thinking about that means of representations. Then the last last 2 have to do with your action expression. How are you showing that you read the book and what you learned from the book? So again, thinking about your students, if you're only giving them one option, you're going to be missing the boat. How do you feel about, okay, so she wants everyone to type a 3-page assignment. She's giving one choice. She is not giving options of how you can demonstrate that you read the book. Some of you think it's torture. Some of you think you have to quit the book club. Some say about how about 1 page. I'm kind of that nerd who likes to write, so I probably would have been the blue and picked okay. But again, that assignment that she gave, nobody in this book club is interested in. That's not going to be motivating for them. They might not do their best work. What would you want to do instead? Do I see anybody picking? Did I see everyone pick the same choice? No, this is why choices are important. Not everyone picked the same thing. Some of you picked drawing or painting pictures. For me, I'm like my son, I have poor fine motor skills. I literally cannot draw more than a sticky figure. I would never pick that in a million years, but I know other students and adults who love to do that. 3-minute oral presentation, obviously given what I do for a living, I do training consulting. I absolutely would love to have that as a choice. That's what I, do all the time. Nobody wants to take a test about the book or write the book report as described. Some of you are scrappers, making scrapbook pages. I used to do that a long time ago. And some of you chose that. Nobody chose to create a video advertising the book. That could be a generational thing. My kid is going 8th grade. He absolutely would have picked that one in a second. Loves making videos. And you probably have students who are going to fall in these categories. You might have kids who love to write. You might have kids who love to draw. You might have kids who love the oral reports. Some kids are great test takers. I don't know, you probably don't have any scrappers, so we probably want to offer that to students. Some may want to make a video advertising the book. Again, you need to give those choices. Again, we're just looking at a small group of adults. I only have 7 responses, yet our results as learners and how we want to show our knowledge was all vastly different. We did not say all the same thing. So thinking about your classroom of, I don't know how many kids you have, 20, 25, 30 kids, your pie charts are going to look the same. They are not going to want to all they're not going to get engaged the same way. They're not going to want to all have the information presented in the same way. And they're not all going to want to demonstrate their understanding of the content in the same way. They're all going to have personal preferences. Okay, I'm going to go back to the presentation. Okay. So that was our survey results. So thank you for those of you who completed the survey. That was very helpful. And again, it was anonymous, so personal preferences aren't wrong. So we need to think about, UDL also looks at what barriers exist to learning. And there's different responses when there are barriers. The deficit response, I come from a special education background. That's a huge part of special ed. Okay, let's fix the child. We're gonna write IP, especially in speech. Okay, this kid can't say R, this kid has poor grammar, they have language processing issues. Let's give them speech therapy and fix that barrier they have. The grit response is another one that helps build children, building that resilience. Okay, building them up. You can do this, come on, encouraging them. But let's take the child out of the equation. UDL looks at a structural response. It's looking at, before those kids even walk in the door, what can you do to have your students learn be engaged in the information, to learn the information? So again, UDL is looking at a structural response to respond to those barriers. And again, it's not that any of these are wrong, it's just this is what UDL is about. And we have to look at what barriers are versus challenges. Challenges are things coming from that individual student. We don't have control over that. We don't have control over the kids who walk in our door on the first day of school or remotely how they, we don't have control over the challenges. What we do have control over is trying to limit those barriers that exist within the curriculum, within the structure of our classroom. Those we can control. So that's what we can do before the kids work in. The challenges are going to come in no matter whether the kids have IEPs or not. They're all going to learn differently and all have challenges. We as educators need to work on the barrier piece. Okay, so you can either unmute yourself and say anything. Again, if you're shy, you can type in the chat. If you don't want to say anything, I can give some of my thoughts. What are some of the challenges your individual students face? I worked in special ed for years. I had kids who couldn't read, couldn't do math, kids with visual impairments, kids who had hearing impairments, obviously speech and language impairments, kids who were nonverbal. Any of you have any particular challenging students or comments? You can write in the chat if you don't want to unmute. That's okay too. I'll just give examples then, since nobody's giving an example. You have your English language learners. You might have kids with behavioral challenges. You have kids with physical challenges who maybe are in a wheelchair, or even a kid who comes in, breaks his leg over the Christmas break, comes back in crutches. These are all challenges and barriers in the classroom setting. Or somebody breaks their arm and they can't write anymore. It's not just your kids with disabilities. Now, here's the other thing we need to think about, though. We can't control the challenges of the students. We can't. These are the kids who walk in our door, and we will teach them all. But There are barriers present in classroom. It could be your physical classroom. Obviously, we have our virtual learning environment. That's a whole new set of barriers. Your school itself, your district itself, or the curriculum. Those have barriers kind of just inherently built into them. Again, I don't know if anybody in this group doesn't see too many sharers, and that's okay. I'm a sharer, so I would talk all day. Comment of any of the barriers you have experienced in your classroom, your school, or your curriculum. If you don't share, I'll give some examples that relate to UDL. No, okay. I'll give an example of a barrier. I came from a district, again, not in LIU before I worked here. They used common assessments. I don't know if you have any of your districts use common assessments, but all the kids had to take the same test. That goes against the UDL principle of multiple means of action and expression. Kids don't all express their knowledge in the same way. Look at how we all wanted to express our understanding of the books that we read for the book club, all different ways. Common assessments are a barrier, and a lot of districts do require them. Physical barriers in the classroom space. You know, when my son was in 4th grade, he had 30 kids in a classroom and they barely had to move around the desks. So there are physical barriers in our classroom based on just the sheer number of students alone. Obviously, the biggest barrier that we're all looking at right now is virtual learning. Some of you may be doing a hybrid. I know that's what my son's going to be doing, is a hybrid approach. Some of you may have kids coming in the just regular school starting. Others of you may have kids in virtual learning. You know, it's going to look different. Those are some big barriers that are going to be present. Again, it's not in your school, but again, it's in how instruction's being delivered. This is a nice chart. Again, it might look a little small, but you have access to the slides. If you go to the CAST website, this is all over their website. It kind of, and again, I don't have time to get into the depth of the CAST website. Again, this is a general overview, but it gives you options. Well, what does it look like? What are some options for multiple means of engagement? What do I do? What are some choices? It gives you ideas, multiple means of representations. Where should I diversify how I'm representing? And same with action expression. Again, if you're using common assessments, that's kind of not going to work. But how can I have the students demonstrate knowledge other than taking a test or other than doing a book report? What are some ways? So again, on the CAST website, and you can look right here at the bottom, here's the link, the udlguidelines.cast.org. But if you go to cast.org, this information is on there. Again, in the interest of time, this is just an overview. I just wanted to share that document. So thinking about lesson planning, and obviously this sounds overwhelming. This is so many things to think about, especially now we have even more challenges and barriers to think about because of remote learning. So you're supposed to think about, again, the engagement, how you're going to get your students engaged, how you're going to present that information to the student, and then how are they going to show you that they learned the information. Those 3 principles. So these are all hyperlinks. You all have access to the slides. It's on that chart. I can certainly click on these and show these to you here, but if you have the slide deck open on your own computer, you can look at these. You're not, I'm not going to leave you out there hanging. Okay, this is how you should be doing all your lessons for all your kids, but I want to give you some starting points of lesson planning with UDL. And again, I'm all about not reinventing the wheel. People have resources out there. Please use them. So I'm going to click on the link so you can see what they are if you don't have the slide presentation with you to see them. So modeling UDL plans. Again, the CAST website has a lesson plan builder. They have some examples here of what some UDL lessons look like. They have, obviously these are some, I honestly don't know what fractal is. It's science, but I don't even know what that means. But butterflies, and you learn about rocks, whatever. The CAST website here, they have something called Lesson Builder that you can explore some examples of different lessons. This link, the step-by-step lesson UDL planner. This is a PDF that you can download. If you look over here, you can see there's a download button, or you can print it, but you can download it for future use and then print it out. So it's kind of to help you look through the areas of UDL and see if you're planning your lesson using those 3 principles in mind. Again, proactive, we talk about that design. So looking at engage, do you have a goal for the lesson? So that's your whatever, obviously thinking of your standards, that's likely what your goal is going to be. But engagement. So here's some questions you can ask yourself and think about when you're thinking of engagement. This comes from understood.org. They have a lot of information on UDL also. Representation, again, some questions you can ask yourself in that area. And action expression, how the students are going to show you. So that's, again, this is part is proactively designing, thinking about before you even teach 1 second of a lesson. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling too far. Then implementation, obviously during the lesson, other questions you can ask yourself, how are they doing with the things I offered them? And then the last step is, of course, reflection. After you did the lesson, okay, what could I have done differently next time? And we all do that, so as it is, but thinking in the UDL framework. So this is just a nice little resource of guiding questions that you can ask yourself, and it kind of gives you a lesson planner. These are, again, this is a hyperlink. It's gonna, again, I'm all about sharing resources. I can't tell you anything in an hour presentation that you need to know, but again, this is an article, this is from Edmentum, but again, they give you some information on UDL, and there are like there's UDL Exchange from CAST and model lesson plans, which I showed you, but there are other resources to UDL, and they are all in here. These are the top 6 ones they recommend you could take a look at for how to make your lesson planning, fall under the principles of UDL. And then, of course, one other site, I'm always sharing resources anytime I do a presentation. UDL IRN, they actually do a yearly conference. They had it in June virtually this year that I attended. Tons of great information. It is not free, but they have a lot of some free information on their website, something you have to be a member to get. But again, they talk a little bit. There's you can download beliefs and practices in UDL, and there's a PDF. I'm not going to do that, but you know how to download a PDF. But again, so that's just another resource for you, because it can be overwhelming. Like, okay, I'm doing all these things, or I've been doing everything wrong all along. I don't want anybody to think that. I want you to just, again, I don't expect you to August 24th or whenever you're starting school, okay, all my lessons are UDL. I want you to just think about, what am I doing? What could I maybe do a little bit differently that I'm not doing, and just digest it slowly. So I just want to give you some next steps, since we are getting short on time here. Excuse me, my voice is not good today, and I'm presenting all day. To think about. So those resources I shared with you on the previous slide, those would be great to check out to start brainstorming, how can I reduce those barriers in your classroom? And again, you don't have control over everything. Your district uses common assessments for, say, science and social studies, like my son did in elementary school. That's going to be a barrier that you're not going to have control over. You're going to have to give that assessment. But thinking about some of the barriers, the things you do have control over. I'm going to advertise for the IU. There is a full day. Again, this is an hour. UDL, there are trainings that are multiple days on this topic. So again, I just went over a quick overview. We are going to be offering a full day training at LIU. Now, as of now, I'll say at LIU. Out of this point, it will likely be virtual, but who knows about January? We can be optimistic that maybe it would be face-to-face, but September 29th, it'll be via Zoom, this type of format. We're gonna have a full day UDL training. The presenters are Lori Hersek. She's our inclusive practices trainer consultant. And the other one is going to be me. We're presenting together. But again, that'll be an entire day on UDL. And again, UDL, obviously, implementing these strategies is a bit complicated in your virtual learning environment. But you can still incorporate some of those principles. And I'm sure as part of that full day training, virtual learning, just because that's obviously what we're all facing right now, will be a part of that discussion. And of course, to get credit, remember you need to do evaluations for everything. You need, so thinking about if this training, again, this introductory training met expectations, how you might use or share, what information resonated with you. And again, this is just a hyperlink to our day one schedule. Does anybody have any questions? We have just a few minutes here if anybody had any questions. If not, our next group of sessions do start 11. I will be presenting on Assistive technology supports for literacy. If you work with kids who have needs with written expression or reading and want to know about some AT available, I will be presenting on that, but there's lots and lots of other options occurring at 11. Does anyone have any questions or comments that they would like to share? You can put them in the chat or unmute yourself. But I do want to thank you for all of you for attending. Again, I have a UDL session later this afternoon on kind of braiding the UDL and MTSS mindsets together and how those two work together. So if you want to learn more about UDL as it relates to MTSS, I will be talking about that at the 1:30 sessions this afternoon. Okay, doesn't look like there's any questions in the chat, so thank you all for attending. I'm gonna end the meeting. Wait, 5 new messages. Okay, I'm sorry, I did not see these messages in the chat. For some reason, it didn't show up when I was screen sharing. Space in the classrooms, yes, that's a huge issue I did bring up. And the unsupported families, English language learners. Okay, so those are the ones I talked about. I'm very sorry that I didn't see those comments. I had my chat open, but it didn't refresh. Well, enjoy your next session. I hope to see you at a later session today. Thank you.